Okay, this one gets weird. House of Leaves is the debut novel of American author Mark Z. Danielewski, published officially in the year 2000. While the vast majority of the book falls under conventions of the horror genre, it has also been described as a postmodern experiment, a satire of academic criticism, and a love story. The narrative follows... No, that's not going to do it. The book is an amateur's analysis of an academic text about a documentary about a family that lives in a house that's a quarter-inch longer on the inside than it is on the outside. Yeah, this video is by no means a detailed overview of House of Leaves, but to make a very complex and highly subjective story short, the book begins with tattoo shop apprentice Johnny Truant discovering a manuscript written by a recently deceased old man named Zampano. Inside this manuscript is a lengthy dissertation on a documentary film called the Navidson Record. Despite Zampano's extensive references to literary sources, Truant is shocked to find that most of these sources, along with the Navidson Record itself, do not appear to exist. And even if they did, Zampano wouldn't be able to visually analyze them as well as he does on paper on account of him being totally blind. Are you with me so far? Per Zampano's analysis, the Navidson Record follows photographer Will Navidson as he and his neglected wife Karen move their life and 2 kids into an old house in Virginia to work on their marriage. Wanting to document their new life, Navidson equips the house with various cameras and microphones and starts recording. After about a month in, the family returns from a trip to find startling changes to the house, including the unexplainable appearance of a door in the living room, which, chillingly, opens up into an impossible hallway that trails off into an immense, dark, dimension-defying labyrinth. On top of this, Navidson discovers that the interior of the house is a quarter-inch larger than the exterior of the house, and that margin is gradually increasing. Spooky, right? Now imagine reading that through increasingly unhinged interjections and footnotes by Zampano, Johnny Truant, and various editors while the formatting of the book expands, contracts, leans, sags, flips, changes color, or outright breaks, lending a dimension to the book that is impossible to chart logically. And, by virtue of reading this book, you may have alerted an invisible bloodthirsty creature to your presence, so you better focus on these words instead of turning around. Don't turn around, don't turn around. Since its release, House of Leaves has garnered a dedicated cult following from readers. Its inversions, interrogations, and parodies of literary conventions and narrative framing have been examined and explored by fans and academics alike, and there are tons of differing theories as to the story's real meaning. But no matter the lens or interpretation, one thing is agreed upon by all. It is highly unlikely that House of Leaves could have been pulled off in any other medium. Its narrative, development, and execution are utterly unique to the substrate of literature. Its definition begins and ends by the format of ink forming words on paper. Now, in the past, Danielewski himself has worked to create a television adaptation of House of Leaves, set in the wake of the book's explosion in popularity, with similarly bizarre dimensional disturbances occurring to new characters. But as of February 2020, the project has been reportedly abandoned. This didn't stop Danielewski from releasing the first 3 teleplays for download on his website, and I highly recommend you read them, but as far as the creator is concerned, any plans for a House of Leaves screen adaptation have evaporated. While the rudimentary haunted house concept of House of Leaves is definitely enticing, you can hardly blame Danielewski or most major media producers for benching the idea. With as many details, subplots, and idiosyncrasies as it has, it would be a logistical nightmare to faithfully adapt the story, and if there's no book quite like House of Leaves, there's little hope of a similarly complex blueprint in cinema. Right?
Ladies and gentlemen, I would appreciate the loan of any small personal object from your pocket. Look closely, sir. You'll find the key back in your pocket. May we see it, please?
After your old tricks, I see.
Why not? I'm a charlatan. What's that, sir? Did I used to be a magician? Sir, I'm still working on it.
In 1973, filmmaker Orson Welles released another, similarly genre-stretching work. Its classifications have ranged from documentary to experimental to the very first video essay. The film was called F for Fake, and it followed Welles as he explored the inconstant nature of authenticity and deception through stories of famous frauds. Examining the careers of an art forger, a hoax biographer, and even himself, Welles flew in the face of convention through ambiguous reenactment, impossibly twisting narratives, and constant rupturing of the fourth wall.
Hello.
Welles serves as both character and unreliable narrator to supposedly true stories about falsehoods, blurring the lines between truth and lies as easily as the ones between documentary and theater, all the while interrogating the credentials of so-called experts who would enforce the difference. While it's not exactly hard to follow the kinetic plot of F for Fake, it's made twice as difficult by Welles's near-constant editorial digressions. A large part of the movie is concerned with misdirection, and Welles often embraces this element throughout by donning a magician's hat and cape. But even when subduing his own showmanship for the sake of the film's momentum, Welles is always interjecting with one detail or another, running a parallel commentary to the subject like an unruly Greek chorus. Thanks to his own natural charisma and some clever editing, Welles's analysis is never unwelcome or abrupt, but over time, his comments become normalized, expected by the audience, buying their confidence before exploiting it to twist the narrative in an unexpected new direction. Welles influences the story and how it's told, just as much as the story and its telling influence Welles.
For the past 17 minutes, I've been lying my head off.
It's this ever-shifting blend of clashing narrative lenses and devices that makes F for Fake an ideal prototype for a film adaptation of House of Leaves. From the constant manipulation of the fourth wall, to the intertwining narratives, to the total untrustworthiness of their narrators. Where F for Fake uses obscurity to amaze its audience, House of Leaves uses it as a weapon, burying its audience under detail after detail until they become lost in its labyrinth. So imagine, if you will, House of Leaves the movie in the style of F for Fake. Assuming that events progress linearly in time, one possible adaptation of the multiple layers of narrative could show the events read by one character play out before us as an imagined or remembered subplot. As Johnny Truant discovers and delves into Zampano's manuscript, his footnotes become narration that permeate his visions of what he reads. At times he defines, others he comments, but more than anything, he interrupts, sometimes to the point of obscuring our view of what exactly it is he's reading. This is a narrative tool borrowed from Welles, used originally for misdirection, but employed by Truant to expository or especially horrific effect as his sanity deteriorates. Imagine seeing Truant begin his investigation and spending 15 or so minutes in the world of the Navidson Record, before cutting abruptly back to Truant to find that he's nailed his windows shut and has allowed his apartment to become as unkempt as he now looks. Running a layer beneath Truant's overarching plot is Zampano's analysis of the film The Navidson Record, representing a shift in both narrative lens and subject. It's entirely possible for Zampano to never be seen and only be heard, as it's his voice in which the events of the Navidson Record are related. What matters for this layer of narrative is that this is where the pseudo-documentary style of Orson Welles should thrive. Here, the film might change aspect ratios and take on a presentation similar to a director's home media commentary, where the events of the Navidson Record play out with narrated insights from both Zampano and Truant beneath it, sometimes even contesting or outright arguing with each other's views from across the parameters of the format itself. Zampano's many citations of other works might manifest as Wellesian detours from the main plot, quick cuts of artifacts and passages from the original book's appendices, intended to enrich the material but ultimately just adding more pieces to an already difficult puzzle. The result is a found footage record of a supposedly genuine paranormal event whose presentation is directly altered by its audience. We're not watching the Navidson Record. We're observing its analysis through the eyes of an unstable or otherwise unreliable third party. If presented in the manner we've been exploring, the House of Leaves movie should be faithful to the presentation of the original text, the story of the eldritch house on Ash Tree Lane, filtered by the combined experiences of Will Navidson, Zampano, Johnny Truant, and us, the viewer. By the time the final act, whatever that means, rolls around, any faith in our original narrator Johnny should be lost, as he becomes a part of the house's story and maliciously embraces his role as such, just as Welles manipulated the depiction of his own film's subjects to spin a compelling yarn. Now, just to restate my earlier point, there is no medium that could have contained House of Leaves in its myriad detail better than the original. To incorporate every detail of plot and atmosphere would mean expanding the scope of the film project to several installments, or better still, a miniseries, a sentiment I'm sure Danielewski shared when he wrote his teleplays. For the purposes of this experiment in both genre and execution, Welles's F for Fake most closely resembles the kind of frenetic, untethered, and yet utterly gripping examination that I like to see House of Leaves adapted to parallel. A cryptic and complex study of a deceptive, yet uniquely human, phenomenon.
And wish you all true and false a very pleasant good evening.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching this video. If you have your own ideas about how House of Leaves should translate to another medium, please feel free to comment those below. If you want to see me mash up more stories and genres and formats, oh my, please hit the subscribe button below to be notified when I release new videos. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.